Jason Statham finally names 5 actors he hated most.
Yeah, he's a little jealous of me, you know. He doesn't like, my sophisticated...
Imagine being so unshakable, so disciplined, and so respected that almost no one dares to get on your bad side. That's Jason Statham. On screen, he's the ruthless Frank Martin in Transporter, the explosive Chev Chelios in Crank, and the cold-blooded killer in the Expendables. Off screen, he's just as no-nonsense, always on time, always professional, and never entertaining ego games. He doesn't chase smiles in interviews, he doesn't care about being Hollywood's favorite, and he has zero patience for arrogance. But here's the thing, even a man like Statham has a line. Cross it with disrespect and you're done. He won't forget, and he definitely won't forgive. So, who are the unlucky few that managed to make Hollywood's toughest action star lose his cool? Here are 5 actors Jason Statham absolutely can't stand, and why he'll never share the screen with them again. Number 1. Shia LaBeouf. When Jason Statham dropped his name, the room froze. Not because people knew of some long-standing feud, but because no one even realized the two had ever crossed paths. And yet, Statham didn't just know him, he couldn't stand him. The shocking part, they had never shared the screen. Not a single movie, not even a red carpet photo together, which is exactly why Statham's words hit even harder. We were in talks for a film a few years back, Statham revealed calmly, his voice steady. The studio was all in. I wasn't. I told them it wasn't a good fit. He found out and sent me a message. He didn't need to read it aloud. He didn't even hint at the exact words. His expression said enough. It wasn't professional. It wasn't respectful, it was flat out childish. And for an actor like Statham, who built his career on discipline and grit, that was the ultimate deal breaker. The audience didn't need details. LaBeouf's history of public meltdowns and reckless behavior filled in the blanks. Statham wasn't dealing in gossip, he was laying down facts, recalling a private exchange that ended any chance of them ever working together. The clash wasn't about one message, it was about 2 completely different worlds colliding. For Statham, acting was simple. Show up, do the work, and leave the ego at the door. For LaBeouf, it was chaos. He thrived on method madness. Tantrums in trailers, locking himself away for days, screaming improvised lines, demanding everyone orbit around his process. And that, for Jason Statham, was the line in the sand. He didn't see himself as some tortured genius. He was a worker, a professional, a man who believed respect mattered more than suffering. LaBeouf's radical methods, his endless conflicts, his hunger for attention, everything Statham despised about Hollywood. They never met again, never exchanged another word. And when asked about it, Statham didn't hesitate. I don't need to work with someone who thinks suffering makes them better. What makes me better is respecting others. No fight, no drama, just a cold, permanent verdict. Not in this project, not in any other. Never. Number 2. Vin Diesel. When Jason Statham crossed paths with Vin Diesel, it wasn't just 2 action stars sharing the screen. It was a collision of egos big enough to shake a billion-dollar franchise. On the surface, Fast and Furious and its spin-off Hobbs and Shaw looked like a dream matchup, 2 titans of action cinema, side by side. But behind the cameras, the tension was real, and every ounce of competitiveness you saw on screen wasn't acting, it was personal. Statham built his career on discipline, punctual, precise, professional to the bone. Diesel, on the other hand, walked in late, demanded rewrites, and reshaped scenes to keep his alpha image intact. For Statham, who treats every shoot like a military operation, that was a direct insult. He didn't mince words either. At one point, Statham reportedly described the experience as working with a teenager trapped in a bodybuilder's body. When the cameras were rolling, you'd never know. But the moment the promo tour began, the cracks showed. Vin Diesel's absences weren't just noticed, they were felt, and when he finally did appear, the air turned ice cold. Group interviews became silent battlegrounds. Eyes avoided each other. The obvious was never spoken. For Jason Statham, the problem wasn't only Diesel's lack of commitment, it was his attitude. Diesel carried himself like the set was his kingdom, like everyone else should feel lucky to breathe the same air. But Statham, forged in the grit of Guy Ritchie's British cinema, built on sweat, precision, and discipline, had zero tolerance for that kind of arrogance. There was never a shouting match, never a public blow-up, but behind the scenes, the message was brutal and crystal clear. I don't ever want to film with him again, and Statham meant it. The franchise tried to reunite them, but he walked away. When pressed for answers, his response cut deeper than any fight could. Respect isn't demanded, it's earned. That line drew the curtain on their relationship. No repair, no reconciliation, just an unshakable truth. Jason Statham doesn't tolerate Vin Diesel, doesn't want him near, and couldn't care care less if that makes headlines. Number 3. Jared Leto. You need me to undo this world you created, Statham recalled. The mention froze the room, not because of scandal, but because no one even knew they had nearly worked together. And yet, they almost did. We were going to do a thriller together, he revealed. Everything fell apart before it started, and I'm glad it did. Then came the story that explained why. Leto arrived at their first meeting like a self-appointed prophet. He didn't greet anyone. No handshake, no eye contact. He demanded to be addressed only by his character's name. He didn't even sit. He stood silently, staring at a wall, as if waiting for a vision. The crew thought it was a parody. Statham didn't. He laughed, but it was the kind of laugh laced with disbelief. We're at a coffee meeting, he said. You're not in a monastery. Some actors call it method. He calls it disrespect. To him, there's nothing admirable about wandering around in costume weeks before filming begins, pretending to be someone else while the crew waits and the set drags on. He comes from a different school, one built on discipline, professionalism, punctuality, collaboration. That's what matters, not theatrics. I don't care how good you are in front of the camera, he once said. If I have to babysit your ego all day, it's useless. And he meant it. When faced with Jared Leto's antics, he didn't play along. He didn't compromise. He walked away. No excuses, no statements, just a clear stance. He would never work with Leto, not out of jealousy, not out of ideology, but out of respect for cinema and for himself. His words were sharp and final. I don't want to surround myself with actors who need to invent a parallel world just to function. If you can't act without disappearing into a delusion, maybe this isn't for you. Since then, their paths have never crossed. And if it's up to him, they never will. Number 4. Mark Wahlberg. When Jason Statham said his name, the room shifted. This wasn't like the others. This one carried weight. They had shared the screen in The Italian Job, a film remembered fondly by audiences. But for Statham, that set wasn't nostalgia. It was a red flag. He's the kind of person who walks into a room and everything has to revolve around him, Statham recalled. There wasn't anger in his tone, just a weariness that suggested he had lived through it more than once. During filming, Wahlberg would vanish in the middle of scenes to take calls. He turned the set into a revolving door of distractions, pushing his burger chain from his trailer, cutting into production meetings to talk supplements, even organizing motivational seminars while cameras sat idle. The crew waited. The actors stood around cooling off. The shooting day stretched longer than it should. Wahlberg was always joking, always selling, always performing. But, as Statham saw it, only for himself. What gnawed at him wasn't the hustle, it was the hypocrisy. And for Statham, that was the final line. Mark Wahlberg built his career on the image of being the tough Boston kid who never lost touch with his roots. But when Jason Statham spoke about him, the mask was ripped away. He sells himself as working class, Statham said, but then he's flying in a private jet to a business seminar, preaching discipline. That's not my kind of people. On The Italian Job, they barely shared scenes. No fights, no blow-ups, nothing dramatic on set. Yet for Statham, that brief experience was enough. He didn't argue with him, didn't insult him. He simply made a quiet decision. Never again. There are actors he'll avoid working with in the future, but Wahlberg, Statham won't even step into the same room. So when he finally said his name in that interview, it wasn't with anger. It was with the calm certainty of a man crossing off a name he'd been carrying for years. And just like that, the conversation ended, but the echo of it didn't fade. But if that name hit hard, the next one stunned everyone. Number 5. Steven Seagal. The moment Jason Statham spoke his name, the room erupted in laughter. Everyone assumed it was just another jab, a playful dig. But then the silence hit because Statham wasn't joking. With a stone-cold expression, he said, "Steven Seagal is a joke, and not a good one." It was a bombshell. Their rivalry had always been whispered about in Hollywood, but never confirmed. And now, with one sentence, Statham made it clear this wasn't petty beef, this was personal. It wasn't about fame or ego, it was about respect for the art of fighting. Statham had lived it. Years of brutal training in kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, and karate had left him scarred. Broken bones, bloodied brows, real pain. To him, martial arts were sacred. To Seagal, Statham believed he turned it into theater. "I trained hard, I broke bones, I split my eyebrow open." He turned all that into pantomime. He was pointing directly at Seagal's on-screen antics, fake-looking punches, opponents collapsing before contact, fights that looked more like bad rehearsals than real combat. To Statham, it wasn't just bad choreography, it was an insult to everything he had fought for. And then came the moment that pushed him over the edge. At a private gala, Seagal leaned in with a smug smile and told him, "I opened the way for guys like you." Statham didn't reply. He didn't need to. He just locked eyes with him, and in that silence, he made himself a promise. The day he spoke about Steven Seagal in public, he wouldn't hold back. What happens when Jason Statham finally speaks his mind? You get the kind of line that explodes across the internet in minutes. minutes. In one interview, arms crossed and jaw locked, he delivered a shot no one saw coming. He walks like he's Bruce Lee, but Bruce Lee did the work. He didn't. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was Statham drawing a line in the sand. To him, Steven Seagal wasn't just another actor. He was a fraud, wrapped in bravado. While Seagal was busy selling the illusion of a hero, men like Statham were throwing themselves into fight scenes, taking hits, bleeding for authenticity. This wasn't personal. It was principle. In Statham's world, you don't inflate your legend without earning it. That kind of shortcut in his code of ethics is a betrayal, and betrayal is something he never forgives. At the end of the day, Jason Statham isn't in Hollywood to make friends. He's there to make movies, and he does it with a code. Discipline, respect, professionalism. Those who live by it earn his loyalty. Those who don't, they end up on the very short list we just went through. 5 names, 5 stories, 1 truth. If you cross the line with Statham, there's no coming back. And maybe that's why he's still standing as one of the most respected action stars in the world. Because while others play the game, he never compromises who he is. So, what do you think? Was he right to cut ties? Or do some of these actors deserve another chance? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more untold Hollywood stories like this one, make sure to like and subscribe, because when Jason Statham speaks, the whole industry listens.